We are back. This is the Andrew Lawton Show here on AM 980. We were just listening to a couple of ads there, and it always strikes me, working in radio, I always listen very closely to ads because I always just like to hear how they are. And same as television. I don't love ads, but I like good ads. And I respect good marketing, and I respect good branding and all of these other things. And anytime there is a force, typically government, trying to handicap people's ability to promote their product, whatever the product is, whether it's a TV show or a perfectly uncomplicated latte, see, I listen to the buzzwords, or a chocolate bar, whatever the case may be, they are very competitive. They have to be. There's a lot of competition in many different sectors, certainly in the food sector. And I remember when we talked a couple of months ago with Senator Nancy Green-Rain about her push to actually block any sort of marketing or advertising of unhealthy foods towards children up to 13. There was a very swift outcry from people that said, come on, this is a parent's responsibility. If you're going through a grocery store with your child, to say, no, you can't have that. We shouldn't ban companies from having mascots or having ads or whatever the case may be. And now we have an even broader ban that's before Health Canada. They're considering a ban on marketing unhealthy food to kids under the age of 17. Senator Green-Rains was 13. Now we're looking at anyone shy of 18 years of age. This could cover anything that's on TV, online, print advertising, could even block in-store displays and sports team sponsorship. This was announced by a panel in St. John's, Newfoundland. They're now launching Health Canada public consultations on how foods are marketed to kids. I want to bring into the show here David Clement, who is the North American Affairs Director for the Consumer Choice Centre, which just launched a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact. David, good to talk to you again. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
So let's start off right out of the gate here, because it is a newer organization. What is the Consumer Choice Centre, and certainly its North American operation? What is the goal here?
So the Consumer Choice Center, we're actually an international organization. What we do is we look to empower and educate consumers in terms of their rights and consumer access rights and issues surrounding consumer choice. So, we evaluated kind of the Canadian political spectrum, the U.S. political spectrum. There are certainly a lot of groups who advocate, or they say they advocate, rather paternally on behalf of consumers, but there was no voice pushing back and saying that we don't need, as consumers, we don't need the government acting as a parent. We don't need the government limiting consumer choice and limiting market access. In fact, the best way to proceed in terms of having consumers make the best decisions possible is to rely on the market, is to open up market access and to ultimately treat adults like adults. So our mission is to do exactly that. We point out regulatory overreach when we see it, whether that be in Ottawa, whether it be provincially in Queen's Park, or internationally in places like Brussels or Washington, D.C.
And it's really counter to what we hear from a lot of these self-styled consumer advocacy groups, who a lot of the time are pushing for stronger and stronger government regulations. You're saying, no, consumers need to have the right to really make a lot of these decisions for themselves.
Absolutely. We far too often we see these organizations say that they're advocating for consumer protection when all they're really doing is advocating for more government, for more paternalism, for a constricted market. They operate on the premise that people don't know what's best for themselves. And our goal is to counter that narrative and say, wait a second, if you ask consumers what they think, more often than not, you're going to find people who say otherwise and say, hey, I'm an adult, I can make these decisions for myself. Please let me do so.
To bring it back to this particular proposal here, obviously this is at this point not a one singular piece of legislation that we're looking at. I know Senator Green-Rain has said, though, that she'll amend her bill potentially, which is something that we need to keep a very close eye on here. But when you look at how broad some of these stipulations are, one person sent me an email here saying, what about Tim Horton's sponsorship of Timbits hockey? Will this now be banned? And that was a great example I hadn't thought of. And given what I'm seeing here as being the possibilities, the answer could be yes. Yeah,
I mean, so there are three major kind of huge red flags with this from a consumer's perspective. The one that you just touched on is the ambiguity of how this could be applied in practice. So something like Timbits soccer or hockey or atomic hockey, if you read the proposal as is and you take them at their word, those would certainly be programs that could be banned because they could be seen as junk food marketing towards children.
Yeah, Red Bull sponsorship of sporting events, another example.
Exactly. And I mean, what makes this whole proposal ridiculous is that if the proposal is going to go and eliminate one of the greatest youth exercise programs in the country, it's running against its initial goal of having children be healthier. I mean, everybody wants children to be healthier, but don't go and eliminate Timbits hockey in the process and take away that valuable resource for kids to be active and start to generate the habits of healthy lifestyles and things like that. It runs counterintuitive to the notion of public health to go after a program like that.
Would Happy Meal toys be out?
It's a good question. That's one of the ones that's a little less clear. But you could make the argument that based on how it's written and how ambiguous it is, that could certainly fall into the wheelhouse of what would be banned. And I mean, what could be banned gets even worse once we look outside of something like Happy Meal toys. I mean, what about something like Ronald McDonald House, which is technically linked to McDonald's and is in some senses marketing and advertising.
And it's a child-focused service as well?
Absolutely. And the work that they do is, I mean, I couldn't speak highly enough of the work that they do, but the fact that could technically fall under the purview of what would be banned. What are we going to do about holidays like Halloween or Easter, or when companies, like an example would be Red Pack is sponsoring a big summer festival, like a big community festival. Would that be illegal because minors are allowed to attend it? Would it be illegal because the advertisements for that festival to sell tickets could be seen by minors? There's so much ambiguity there, and it's so unclear that it should raise some real concerns for consumers. It should also raise some concerns for parents.
And the one that concerns me as well, I mean, all of it concerns me. One of the elements of it that concerns me is the restriction on product labeling, because we know this is going through at the federal level with cigarette packages, for example. And when you see examples of it, you have these drab, gray, black and white packages that have a company name in very small lettering, but everything looks the same. And I know that your group actually put forward a video, and you designed, sample potato chip bags, which look exactly like the cigarette packages. I mean, is that honestly what we'd be looking at here if anything that was focused on children had to be devoid of branding or labeling, or is this a needlessly facetious adaptation of the law?
I'm not sure if the purpose is for it to extend that far, but just look at how you just outlined the conversation in terms of where we were a few months ago when we were just talking about tobacco, and where we are fast forward a few months and now we're talking about things like Happy Meals. I don't think that it's a stretch to say that there are government bureaucrats or public health officials who want to take it that far. And the fact that we went from having the conversation about tobacco, let's say 6 months ago, and now we're having the conversation about wildly different items shows you that the pace in which these government bodies want to push their agenda is pretty rapid. And it does show you that when we give up when we allow the government to encroach on consumer choice, they just keep moving the ball down the field. And then the next thing you know, we're having discussions about things we never thought would be applicable to regulations like this.
Well, and when we also look at this, the one thing that bothers me enough about this is all of these different regulations and restrictions, but the age as well. I mean, I had my own issues with Senator Green-Rain's proposal going up to 13, but when you include 14 to 17-year-olds, who it's important to note are in an age where they could have jobs, they could have a bit of extra pocket money, they're going to school alone, they're going to variety stores or grocery stores alone. I mean, this is a constituency that gets to make decisions for itself as consumers, and all of a sudden we're treating them all like 4-year-old children.
Well, then that actually, I mean, it should be said that curbing things like childhood obesity or wanting minors to engage in healthy lifestyles is a noble goal. But how ridiculous is the fact that at 17 years old, you could be fully employed, so full-time employment at McDonald's, but it would be illegal for you to see an advertisement for a Big Mac. You can drive. You are of the age of consent for sexual acts. At the age of 13, 14, you can start to work. You can be legally certified to babysit and take the responsibility of other people's well-being into your own hands. So we've already decided, or the government's already decided, that well before 17 years old, you're able-bodied in terms of your ability to make important decisions for yourself.
You're not a legal adult, but you have independence and self-autonomy.
Exactly. You can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't vote, you can't serve in the military quite yet. But we are allowing 17-year-olds to drive. We are allowing them to work full-time. They have incomes. They do things that adults otherwise do. And so it just highlights the hypocrisy there in saying that we're starting the process of giving you autonomy in terms of understanding that you have personal responsibility and with those new facets of life that you're able to do, like driving, there are extra responsibilities. But at the same time, we want to be paternal and hold your hand through life and make sure that, heaven forbid, you see an advertisement for something like Red Bull or Coca-Cola or McDonald's or even Tim Hortons.
Joining me on the line is David Clement from the Consumer Choice Center. David, thanks for your time today. Really great to talk to you on this.
Thanks so much, Andrew.
All right, all the best to you, sir. We've got to take a quick break here. When we come back in just a couple of moments, I want to unpack this a little bit more here. How ridiculous to, first off, take away the right of parents to say yes or no to certain purchases. Advertising is a way that we learn about products. How else can we be expected to learn about products if not by actually hearing from the people who are promoting them, what they are? I think it's important that there's truth in advertising. I think regulating against deception is an important role of government because it is essentially contract enforcement. However, when it comes to banning advertising of products that we deem to be unhealthy, well, the definition of what we call unhealthy changes very rapidly. Let parents make these decisions. Let teens make these decisions. Don't let the government make it. What do you think? 519-643-2222. This is the Andrew Lawton Show on AM 980.